Hello, welcome to Liberty Wolf, episode number 20. My name is Zach Strong. Today we will be talking about law and liberty. But first, I have a couple quick items of business. One, you may have just heard that beep. I'm recording in a different location with different technology today, and it might not be up to the same standards as usual, and there might be a few extra distractions for which I apologize. Second is that I apologize for not recording in a long time. I've actually recorded a couple episodes. I've had technical glitches, and the last one I actually forgot when I moved locations. I am currently living abroad on a temporary basis down in Panama. And so I forgot my voice recorder, which had a full episode, which would have been episode 20, recorded on it. In a future day, I'm sure I will put that, edit that and put it up online here. And the last announcement is that I just learned today, when I started to put this together, that YouTube has decided to censor me. They've actually deleted episode number 17 of this podcast. That episode covered Antifa. And they said I violated their hate speech rules and regulations. That's what tyrants always say nowadays. Hate speech, hate speech. They want to censor you for everything, on everything for hate speech. If you say Marxism is evil and you oppose the communist conspiracy and this radical agenda, they say it's hate speech. If you point out the documented historical fact that Jews, Marxist Jews, created Antifa or founded communism, then they say that's hate speech. You can't say that. You can't point out reality. Truth to these people is like a cross to a vampire. So anyway, today we're going to be discussing law and liberty. And this will be a little bit of a shorter podcast, just to, ease my way back into these podcasts after a number of months being absent. So, what is law and how does it relate to liberty? Right, people think that every law, so-called, passed by Washington or a state legislature or something is an actual law. That's not true. In fact, most laws, so-called, are actually statutes. And most laws, I would contend, are unconstitutional. That is because there is a supreme law, which is the United States Constitution. This law has canonized and codified certain principles. It has enshrined these principles and said these principles are inviolate. They cannot be restricted. They cannot be curtailed. They cannot be taken away from the individual. They cannot be taken from the American people. Remember, the Declaration of Independence says that we have a government by the consent of the governed, right? So any government holds itself accountable to the people, or the people, more accurately, they hold government accountable to themselves, because power springs from the people. It's a bottom-up authority. It's not a top-down authority. It's not the president making the rules. It's not Congress making the rules. Yes, Congress can pass laws, but those laws have to be in harmony with the principles codified in the Constitution. With those "thou shalt not" statements in the Bill of Rights. Let's go straight to the Constitution. First of all, we have a very dire need in this country to immerse ourselves in study of the Constitution and in study of the founding principles that made America great. Make America great again is a nice slogan. Donald Trump didn't invent it. It's been around for a long time. You remember the America First movement? 100 years ago? They were saying, make America great again. Right? It's been a long time since we've needed to make America great again, because we've fallen from grace for well over a century. I would say since the Civil War, it's just been one downhill run. We've gone away from the principles that made this nation what it was, the freest, most powerful, wealthiest nation in world history. The nation with the most influence in the world. The nation whose constitution influenced more other constitutions than any other in the world. Okay, so what made us great? It was the principles codified in the Constitution and the goodness of our people. Because those principles couldn't be followed, or they wouldn't be followed, unless our people were good. Unless they had self-discipline and bowed themselves voluntarily to their Creator and acknowledged His laws. Thou shalt not kill, for example. That His laws are law. That they're set in stone. That they cannot be violated except with His wrath. Right? And so they put those same principles, those same ideologies and ideas into our founding documents. Right? I mean, in truth, the United States Constitution, though the atheists and others scream and holler about it, it's the truth. The Founding Fathers built our Constitution and this country, this great republic, on Israelite, biblical, Old Testament law. They took it largely from the English and the Anglo-Saxons, and the Anglo-Saxons acknowledged that they took it from the ancient Israelites. I mean, as a tangential point, many Caucasian peoples, including the Anglo-Saxons, have Israelite blood literally flowing through their veins. And so anyway, a lot of these ancient traditions came from the Hebrews, which is ironic since the main enemies of those principles today are Hebrews. Anyhow, so let's go to the Constitution, which again is founded on these eternal, timeless, ageless laws that cannot be refuted. They cannot be destroyed, dismissed. This is Article 6, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Quote, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." Close quote. This is one of the most powerful and significant phrases, clauses in the U.S. Constitution. It says that this Constitution trumps state law. This Constitution trumps Supreme Court rulings. This Constitution trumps congressional laws and presidential decision directives and executive orders. This trumps everything else. If Congress passes a law and it's not in harmony with the principles of this document, of the Constitution, it is null and void. If the Supreme Court, for example, says, mothers, you can murder your offspring, you can murder your babies, abortion, that's not valid. That's not constitutional. And a president who swears an oath to defend the Constitution actually has a duty to disobey Roe v. Wade. Tomorrow we could end abortion if we wanted to. The president could enact an order and enforce the Constitution and nullify Roe v. Wade. Did you know that? We don't have to have a Supreme Court ruling to overrule the first ruling because the first ruling is not in pursuance of the Constitution. Therefore, it is null, it is void. Okay, so see, if people understood this, we could actually get something done. But people don't know this because they don't read the Constitution. They don't bother to look at what the law says. This law right here. The supreme law of the land, the Constitution. They don't care. They don't understand. They're so fixated on bread and circuses. What does ESPN say today? Oh, let's go over endless stats. Who cares? Our liberty is being eroded. That's what should matter to us. People would have a lot better handle on this impeachment circus going on too, and all the various FISA warrant violations, and then the whole rigmarole that's going on the last few years with President Trump and those who are seeking to impeach him, who are mainly Marxists pushing that view, if they actually studied the Constitution. They would know whether a law is valid or not, whether it's constitutional or not, if they read the Constitution. For example, they would know that President Trump's, the USMCA, the big free trade deal he's been touting, right? It's NAFTA 2.0 is all it is. They would know that that's not constitutional. and that they should not support Donald Trump in signing that if it ever gets to that point. They would know also that red flag gun laws are not valid because they violate the Second Amendment. They not only violate the Second Amendment, they violate the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. They steal your property, your gun. That's a violation of all sorts of provisions in the Constitution. But how would people know that unless they actually read the document? So we have a great need to really educate ourselves on what our law, the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution, actually says. I submit, and I have believed this my whole life, I have a firm testimony that it is true. In fact, it's a codified part of my religion. But beyond that, though, I know for myself it's true that the U.S. Constitution is an inspired document. God inspired this document. The Founding Fathers, they didn't just get together and use their own wisdom to hatch this plan. They were brilliant. But no, there was a spirit that really brought them together to create what history has proven to be the most successful, the most cogent, the most cohesive and amazing and liberty-protecting document in world history. And that wasn't by accident. That's the Lord's doing. So this document, we need to study it. The U.S. Constitution needs to be studied. And it should be studied also in the context of the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, the various statements from our founding fathers, documents they've written, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams. They wrote amazing documents. Patrick Henry gave all sorts of speeches, Samuel Adams. Their statements really help sharpen our understanding of what they intended. There's always debate about original intent, construction. What does it really mean? Well, does anyone actually read? We know what they mean. We don't really have to debate about it. We know in the overwhelming majority of cases what the Founding Fathers wanted, what they intended. I mean, the U.S. Constitution is clear enough in most cases. All you have to do is read this, and you get it. But if you don't, the Founding Fathers were helpful enough to provide us with all sorts of information. Now, again, this is the supreme law of the land. The judges, Congress, the president, everyone, state, local, federal, doesn't matter. They're all bound by this document. And any of their rulings or laws or dictates that are not in harmony with that are null and void. And we owe no obedience to them. We also owe no obedience to people and cults of personality, but to the law, the supreme law, the U.S. Constitution. Now, George Washington was one of the greatest advocates of the U.S. Constitution. He was one of the great defenders of the Constitution. It was the standard which he always went by. Okay, now here's what he said, and I'm going to read. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs from his farewell address. I mean, obviously, if you haven't studied the farewell address, go do it. Please, please study it. It's one of the all-time great speeches ever given by a political leader in any age of history, especially in U.S. history. He said this: "To the efficacy and permanency of your union, a government for the whole is indispensable." And then he went on and said, "This government, the offspring of our own choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted upon full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free in its principles, in the distribution of its powers, uniting security with energy, and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, has a just claim to your confidence and your support. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political system is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitutions of government. But the constitution which at any time exists, till changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people, is sacredly obligatory upon all. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government." Close quote. The Constitution demands our compliance and respect and obedience. People don't like to think, oh no, we owe obedience to the government. Yes, actually we do owe obedience to just government. The Constitution is a just government. It defends freedom. It protects our property rights. It ensures and guarantees to us our liberty, so long as it's followed, that is. And inasmuch as it does so, because remember, the Declaration of Independence says that's the purpose of government, to secure these rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property, etc. That's the reason governments are instituted. And so as long as the Constitution does that, it is worthy of our support. And it demands and requires our obedience. Remember, obedience to its laws. That's what President Washington said. It's laws. And remember, the only laws that are actually constitutional or that demand our obedience are those which are constitutional. And so yes, constitutional, just, moral, upright laws demand our obedience. They require our acquiescence and our compliance to them. Order is part of freedom. Ordered freedom is a phrase I really like. Freedom without order is anarchy. Liberty without order and just laws is licentiousness. We do not need and have no place for libertinism in the United States. And unfortunately, modern libertarianism has become libertinism because it's devoid of moral law. And that's a point of law that's very important. I belong to the Independent American Party. I encourage you to go visit the website, independentamericanparty.org. Go to the Education Center tab and click on the Principles of Liberty. These are 15 principles which guide our party. Principle number 1. I will read here. It says, "We believe that no people can maintain freedom unless their political institutions are founded upon faith in God and belief in the existence of moral law." Principle number 5. It says, "We hold that the Constitution denies government the power to take from the individual either his life, liberty, or property, except in accordance with moral law, that the same moral law which governs the actions of men when acting alone is also applicable when they act in harmony with in concert." That last part might have been slightly off. I was reciting it from memory. The tab wasn't fully open. Sorry. Yeah, when they act in concert with others. There you go. That's completely 100% true, but the whole concept of moral law has been thrown out the window in our day and age of do whatever you want, right? Whatever you want to do, whatever feels good, do it. That's kind of the philosophy of our age. And so that is not compatible with liberty. Liberty requires law. Law and liberty go together. There is no liberty without law. And the only law that matters is that which secures our liberty. So the two are inexorably connected. Frederick Bastiat, he was one of the great philosophers. He's French. He wrote a book called The Law. And if you ever want to read The Law, you can go again to the independentamericanparty.org website, Education Center tab, and then read The Law by Frederick Bastiat. Okay, it's one of the all-time great books, really. I'm just going to read here just a few paragraphs into it. He makes this statement: "Life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws in the first place." And so law is only just when it defends life, liberty, and property. And the Constitution defends life, liberty, and property. It is a just law, a just system to make laws, and it requires that laws that are made in pursuance thereof uphold life, liberty, and property as well, which is, again, that's another reason why Roe v. Wade is automatically, inherently unconstitutional, and why it should be disobeyed, and why the president has every authority to make sure that it is not followed and that it is not enforced, because it is against the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Supreme Court rulings, which are really opinions by a co-equal branch of government, they are not binding laws. They're opinions. Just like executive orders are not binding laws unless they're supporting the Constitution and are done in the proper manner. Same thing, congressional laws and actions are not binding upon us unless they agree with the Constitution and the principles that defend life, liberty, property. Now, again, I've been calling for education, greater education. We really need to study the Constitution, our founding documents, the words of the founding fathers. We have a tremendous heritage and legacy of liberty in this country, unsurpassed anywhere in the world. There's no one else. England, Germany, Russia, China, South Africa, Congo, Brazil, France, Italy. No one else has a legacy of law and liberty like we do. No one. So we should be ahead of the world when it comes to understanding the principles of liberty, understanding its true relationship to law. Unfortunately, though, the average person has no idea, because the average person has never studied the Constitution. They've never studied law and liberty. Now, James Wilson was one of our more brilliant founding fathers. He was a great legal mind. He said one of my favorite all-time statements, and this is in his Lectures on Law from, I believe, 1791. You can find them online if you look. He said this. Speaking of the virtues, first of all, of what makes America America. What type of virtues do we need as a society? He said, what are those virtues? They are chiefly the same virtues which we have already seen to be descriptive of the American character, the love of liberty and the love of law. But law and liberty cannot rationally become the objects of our love unless they first become the objects of our knowledge. Close quote. Isn't that fantastic? Here, I'm going to read the last part again. Law and liberty cannot rationally become the objects of our love unless they first become the objects of our knowledge. Then he went on to say that the science of law should, in some measure and in some degree, be the study of every free citizen and of every free man. Every free citizen and every free man who has duties to perform and rights to claim. Unless in some measure and in some degree he knows those duties and those rights, he can never act a just and an independent part. Close quote. He also said, let me find it. He said, quote, without liberty, law loses its nature and its name and becomes oppression. Without law, liberty also loses its nature and its name and becomes licentiousness. Close quote. So this science of law, the study of law and liberty, is the study of every free citizen and of every free man. Or at least it should be. Every freeman, F-R-E-E-M-A-N, no space, freeman. We are freemen. Every freeman needs to study law. In the American context, this means studying the U.S. Constitution primarily. You have to understand it. You have to understand the principles of liberty. What makes someone free? Is it just free speech? Can you really be free if you only have the right to speak about it? Can you really be called free if you don't have a right to defend those other rights? For example, if they take away your guns, are you really free? What if they can violate your property and privacy rights at any time? Police in the United States now steal more property from people than criminals. Did you know that? Go look it up. This has been happening now for a few years. The trend has swung in favor of police. Police actually steal more property under civil asset forfeiture laws and other means than robbers do. Are we free? Or have we lost some of our freedom? Virginia, all the chaos going on over there with them trying to ram gun control down everyone's throats. Are they going to be free if they lose their right to defend all of their other rights? I guess you can decide that. But law and liberty, we must study them. It must be the science we study. If we love our freedom, if we value it at all, if we value being called freemen, then we have to study the Constitution. As George Washington said, it is sacredly obligatory upon all of us. And as the Constitution itself says, it is the supreme law of the land, and it trumps every law every ruling, every dictate, every measure anywhere else in the country. Federal, state, local, it doesn't matter. It must comply with the Constitution. But how do you know if it's complying with the Constitution if you don't know what the Constitution says? So I implore you, please study the Constitution. You can find it online. You can buy copies for, what, cents? 50 cents maybe? I don't know. I mean, I have a whole pack of copies. I don't even know where I got them all. I've just, over the years, just accumulated. They're everywhere. Please, get yourself a copy. I mean, I carry 2 or 3 copies in my bag everywhere I go. I have other copies elsewhere. Oops, sorry for that. Law and liberty, folks. We have to become more dedicated. We have to become more dedicated to moral law. We have to become more dedicated and committed to making sure any law that's passed is in compliance with the Constitution. It is fundamentally morally right. And that our elected representatives are doing their part to uphold and defend the Constitution, and that they're not supporting unjust laws, such as Donald Trump being in favor of red flag gun laws. Folks, we need to do better. We need to do better and be better. We need to step forward and defend our freedom. We need to understand and study law and liberty. We must once again become an ordered and free society. Now, I want to end by saying again, thank you to those who have hung in here for all these months in my absence. And welcome to all the new subscribers as well. If you're new, please go check out the old podcast episodes. And despite the censorship, we will continue forward. I will continue to record whenever I have the time and upload them to YouTube. I'm grateful for your support, and I ask for continued support. I ask that you do your part as a free citizen to defend our faith, families, and freedom. So long live liberty, and sic semper tyrannis.